Let me get into Patriots Day right now for everybody. Of course, Patriots Day. Here's an opportunity to think about the fight for freedom so many engaged in 251 years ago with the battles of Lexington and Concord. Thank you, Michael B. of the 10th Amendment Center. Here's the headline: How British Gun Control was the spark that started the war for independence. Now, we're going to go to that in just a minute, but I want to show you this. On this Patriots Day, some folks who are startled, this one right here. Here is more from the Boston Public Library, okay? So, want to give you a little something, a brief history of Patriots Day in Boston, and I want to show you something that I think you'll really like, if I can call it up. It should have been in my news notes. I don't know if I put it in there. It should be there. April 19th has been an important day in Massachusetts for many, many years. The Puritans knew it as Fast Day, a day set aside for fasting and prayer to atone for their sins and ask for God's help in the new year. In 1775, April 19th was the day of the battles of Lexington and Concord and Menotomy that marked the beginning of the Revolutionary War. In 1861, 5 Union soldiers were killed and 36 were wounded during a riot in Baltimore, marking the first casualties of the Civil War on that day. And many of the soldiers were from Massachusetts. Despite the decline of Puritan culture and the increasing separation between church and state, Fast Day remained an official holiday in Massachusetts until well into the 19th century, when it was abolished on March 16, 1894. And the state also declared that April 19th would still be a public holiday, the name of which would be determined later. What followed was weeks of debate in the legislature about what the new holiday would be called. Very quickly, the idea of calling it something related to the Revolutionary War became popular, although some argued that it should still be called Fast Day. Some thought it should be called Lexington Day, others Concord Day. Still others thought it should be Lexington and Concord Day or Concord and Lexington Day. The collective. Everybody's got to argue. It's still a collective decision, right? Still others, possibly tired of the bickering between the different factions, thought it should just be called the 19th of April. Hey, why don't we just call it the 19th? Well, I want to give you a little bit more here from Michael Bolden of the 10th Amendment Center, because he goes into where it could have started. And it could have started in New Hampshire, but they were able to get the explosives out of New Hampshire. And that was weeks before. It was on the seacoast. They had some hidden. It was gun control that started the war for independence. But, of course, they never teach that in government-run schools. It's almost as if they want you to believe the founders fought a long, bloody war just to get representatives to tax them. Of course, that is a lie. The truth, months before the battles of Lexington and Concord, the British launched a systematic campaign to disarm the people, confiscating powder, banning imports, carrying out warrantless searches and seizures, and more. On April 19th, 1775, the revolutionaries fought back. But what came before that? To understand what led to the first shots of the war, we have to back up a little. After the 7 Years' War ended in 1763, the British Empire was buried in debt. But they did two things that changed everything. They stationed a permanent standing army in the colonies, and they expected the Americans to pay for the army and, of course, for the old 7 Years' War. They tried to raise that revenue with a series of internal taxes, including some of the most notorious still remembered today: the Stamp Act of 1765 and the Townshend Act of 1767, as well as the Tea Act of 1773. Each time, the people resisted with petitions and protests and non-compliance. Well, at least they could petition and protest. You get taken away if you protest the wrong things. We'll give you an idea of what one so-called representative wants to do for immigrants if they have the wrong ideologies. He literally doesn't want to let them into the country. Yeah, and he's a supposed conservative, pro-freedom guy. We'll show you that in a minute. And sometimes it escalated. In 1770, 5 colonists were shot and killed by British troops in what came to be known as the Boston Massacre. Then in December 1773, it all boiled over with the Boston Tea Party, of course. Well, the British response was swift and brutal, aiming to suppress any colonial defiance. In the aftermath of the Boston Tea Party, the British Parliament passed what became known as, you got it, this one always stuck in my memory in high school, the Coercive Acts, those and the Intolerable Acts, right? Among other things, they closed the port of Boston and revoked the Massachusetts Charter. Woof! That was, of course, in response to the 1773 Boston Tea Party, December, bringing the colony under the total control of the British government. So we move into 1774 with these. The move only escalated tensions. To many colonists, it was yet another attempt to strip them of their right to self-rule and force them into, as the Sex Pistols would say, submission, going down, down, dragging me down. At the center of this strategy was military control, and that meant taking the people's arms. General Thomas Gage was appointed to replace Thomas Hutchinson as military leader of Massachusetts earlier in 1774. He arrived in Boston and formally took office on May 13th. As Dave Coppell writes, Gage believed the best way to keep the peace was to disarm the colonists. He set in motion a secret plan to remove military supplies, especially guns and gunpowder, from public storehouses across New England. That plan was already in motion by late summer 1774. So we're going through 1774, heading towards, you got it, 1775, and this big anniversary. Most of the weapons and powder in those magazines belonged to provincial governments, but some were owned by individual towns, merchants, or private citizens. The goal wasn't just to neutralize government forces, it was to disarm the people. And we go to August of 1774. General Gage quietly dispatched Sheriff David Phipps to Charleston with orders to prepare the removal of gunpowder stored in the local magazine. The following morning, a detachment of 250 British troops, led by Lieutenant Colonel George Madison, arrived up the Mystic River and landed a short distance from the powder house. With keys handed over by Phipps, the soldiers emptied the magazine without incident. After securing the powder, most of the force returned to Boston, and they were wicked happy, dude. Yeah, guy. But a smaller unit continued on to Cambridge because, of course, they wanted to check out Harvard, where they seized 2 artillery pieces. That's right, because people owned their own private cannons. And, of course, I think it was John Hancock made some, he and his sons made those. News of the British operation spread fast, and panic spread with it. Rumors flew that soldiers had opened fire on colonists and that Boston was under attack from sea. The response was overwhelming. Militia units mobilized across New England. Within a matter of hours, nearly 20,000 armed colonists were on the march toward Boston through Cambridge. The reports turned out to be false, and the standoff ended without bloodshed. The episode became known as the Powder Alarm, and it sent a message louder than any gunshot. The people were ready to fight. The British didn't back down. They escalated. With tensions already high, General Gage ordered warrantless searches for arms and ammunition. The policy sparked outrage across the colonies until they passed the FISA Amendment, the FISA Act. Yep, and it allowed for warrantless searches. And then Donald Trump opposed it, but then he supported it. So everything was fine, and MAGA supported it too. I'm sorry. The Boston Gazette called this Gage's most offensive act yet. Meanwhile, the Sons of Liberty weren't just marching in the streets, they were laying groundwork for open defiance. On September 9th, 1774, the Suffolk Resolves, drafted by Dr. Joseph Warren, were unanimously adopted. They called for a full boycott of British goods, outright defiance of the Coercive Acts, disobedience to courts, tax resistance, and more. It was a public declaration, as they thought it was always necessary, that British authority would no longer be obeyed. This wasn't protest, it was revolution in writing. Well, as part of the coercive acts, Parliament passed the Massachusetts Government Act, which nullified the colony's 1691 charter and stripped the people of their right to elect local officials. Power was centralized in the hands of the royal governor, and that meant Thomas Gage. Under this new authority, Gage dissolved the Massachusetts Assembly in late September 1774, but the people did not comply. 90 elected representatives met anyway in Salem, the town the Gardner family founded with four other families, on October 5th. 2 days later, they reassembled in Concord and officially organized themselves as the Massachusetts Provincial Congress. With John Hancock as president, this new body became the de facto government of, was it Sam? Who was the pewtersmith? Was it Sam Adams? I can't remember. I'll have to look it up. De facto government of the province outside the British-occupied Boston. Maybe somebody can tell me. It collected taxes, purchased supplies, raised a militia, and began securing ammunition stores. Massachusetts was now governing itself, not in theory, but in practice. Oh, it was Paul Revere. Paul Revere was the one. Yeah, it was Paul Revere, of course. This wasn't just resistance. It was a revolution. It was Paul Revere was the metalsmith. Meanwhile, Paul Revere was on his way back from Philly with letters from the First Continental Congress. Just weeks earlier, he had delivered the Suffolk Resolves, helping secure unanimous support for Massachusetts in a stand against British aggression. So essentially, Massachusetts has already declared its independence in a way. Now the communication was going both ways. The colonies weren't just pushing back, they were building real self-government. And just days later, October 14th, the First Continental Congress passed the Declaration and Resolves, October 14th, 1774, condemning the declaratory and coercive acts. Well, of course, 3 days later, Lord Dartmouth, Secretary of State for the colonies, sent a letter to General Gage. His suggestion was simple: disarm the people. Quote, among other things which have occurred on the present occasion is likely to prevent the fatal consequence of having recourse only to the sword, that of disarming the inhabitants of the Massachusetts Bay, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. And this has been suggested, I'm paraphrasing. He left it to Gage to decide when and how to act. Whether such a measure was ever practicable or whether it can be attempted in the present state of things, you must be the best judge. But it certainly is a measure of such a nature as ought to be adopted without almost a certainty of success, and therefore I throw it out for your consideration. Days later, the Crown went even further, turning disarmament into a suggestion, from a suggestion into policy. On October 19, 1774, the King issued an order in council that banned all exports of arms and ammunition to the colonies. Oh, there was a blockade. What? Oh, I thought good guys did that against bad countries, like those evil people in Iran and Venezuela and Cuba. His Majesty is judging it necessary to prohibit the exportation of gunpowder or any sort of arms or ammunition out of this kingdom to carry the same coat-wise for the same time doth therefore, with the advice of this privy council, hereby order, require, prohibit, and command that no person or persons whatsoever shall do this. I'm paraphrasing. Well, of course, in December 1774, word spread that British ships were heading to seize arms and powder stored at Fort William and Mary in New Hampshire. That's right on the seacoast. You can actually see the site where they had buried the stuff. The Boston Committee, really right near the seacoast. The Boston Committee of Correspondence sent Paul Revere north with a warning about it. And on December 14th, a group of about 400 New Hampshire patriots took action. They stormed the fort and preemptively captured all the military supplies on hand, including roughly 100 barrels of gunpowder. The next day they returned. This time they seized 16 cannons, 60 muskets, and other military stores, removing everything before British reinforcements could arrive. That same day, December 15th, General Gage responded to Lord Dartmouth's proposal to disarm the colonies. Your lordship's idea of disarming certain provinces would doubtless be consistent with prudence and safety, but it neither is nor has been practicable without having recourse to force and being master of the country. Well, of course, in early January 1775, a Patriot writer warned of what was coming with a lesson from ancient history. In a letter in the New Hampshire Gazette, this person compared the British arms embargo and threats of confiscation to the Roman subjugation of Carthage. Quote, "Shall we, like the Carthaginians, peaceably surrender our arms to our enemies in hopes of obtaining in return the liberties we have so long been contending for?" He answered with a call to action. "We have not, by the law of self-preservation, a right to seize upon all those within our power in order to defend the liberties which God and nature have we not the right to seize upon the rights given to us by God and nature to defend the liberties God and nature have given us?" And of course, the rest from February on, with Parliament moving, they moved eventually until finally, after the battles of Lexington and Concord, in July of 1775, the Second Continental Congress made the view plain that there should be a declaration of the causes and necessity of taking up arms. And it took fully a year before they got the Declaration of Independence out. And they went through all the debates. Now, while we're at it, I want to just mention something to you here, that on this anniversary, I'm going to have to call it up in my my stacks, but yeah. So let me show you. For a long time, and I thought I had this inside the notes, but for a long time, a man named Dick Hoyt pushed his son down the Boston Marathon route. His son was a quadriplegic and had cerebral palsy. And every year, 32 times, maybe not every year, I think there were a couple years where they had to skip it because of injury or something, he pushed his son. Let me show you. There they are. So Dick Hoyt and his son Rick. There's notes here that Dick served as Grand Marshal the 2015 race in recognition of his accomplishments. That, of course, the race is put on by the Boston Athletic Association. And, you know, some of the locals don't like it because there are a lot of streets that are shut down. Again, it's sort of the long debate about, you know, what a public entity can do. Let me show you some more of them. So here are the Hoyts. Here you go.
Theirs was a bond beyond father and son. It was a relationship formed over countless miles, over a road less traveled.
Why did you take up running with Rick?
Rick wrote on his computer, "Dad, when I'm running, it feels like my disability disappears," which was a very powerful message to me.
When we first started running, I used to run for Rick, but now I'm out there running because we run together as a team.
Their mom.
So it was great stuff. They were sort of, emblematic of the, the families of Boston and the support that people had. He did it the first time in 1980. And I remember I was a little kid. And they completed 32 Boston marathons together until Dick, citing health issues, retired in 2014. He had planned on retiring after the 2013 race, but the father and son never finished because of that year's finishing line bombing. So they came back one more time. I think he died in 2021. And passed away. But that's, remember the name if you can, Rick Hoyt. Good guy. Everybody liked Rick. And they'd always follow Rick on the course and root him on. So Rick Hoyt and his son. Pretty cool. And imagine 26, my brothers run that race twice. Imagine running it, especially going up Heartbreak Hill and running it, pushing a wheelchair, essentially a sports wheelchair with your son, as he started as a boy. And then as the father got older and less capable of running the race, his burden became bigger. Something else. Wow. So I'm glad I was able to call that up. And I'm sorry, I thought I had that inside the news notes. I guess I must have reverted back to one last one. And I did include it. It was just down further. There you go. There's Dick Hoyt. There you go. Headline from 6 years ago. And that's the NBC story that I had there. Yeah, so he died. And that was 2021, March 18th. So there you go. So sorry about that. It took a little detour there to call it back up again, but we got there twice. So, okay. And all honor, I don't know whether anybody knows the Hoyt family in Massachusetts, but if you're watching, hats off to the Hoyt family. I know what it's like to run long distance, and that is a remarkable feat and shows real family support. What an adoring thing to do. Just great.